Welcome to the Sins of Scientology, a true crime podcast. In this episode, we delve into the shadowy world of a man at the helm of one of the most controversial and secretive organizations in the world. How did a boy from Pennsylvania, once plagued by illness, rise to wield immense power within a global empire? What dark secrets are hidden behind closed doors, where allegations of abuse, forced abortions, and high-profile defections cast long shadows? And what really happened to the leader's wife who mysteriously vanished from a public view? Join us as we uncover the tale of ruthless ambition, control, and a relentless quest for power. Each revelation will leave you questioning the true nature of this secretive organization and the elusive leader. Stay with us as we unravel the sins at the core of Scientology, a story more shocking and disturbing than you could ever imagine.
David Miscavige was born on April 30th, 1960 in Bristol Township, Pennsylvania. The son of Ron and Loretta Miscavige, David was one of 4 siblings in a tight-knit working-class family. His father, Ron, was a salesman and a prolific musician. His mother, Loretta, was a homemaker and a nurse. David's early years were marked by a blend of ordinary suburban life and the unique challenges posed by his health. As a child, David struggled with severe asthma and allergies, which often left him feeling weak and isolated. This chronic illness led to frequent school absences and hospital visits, shaping a sense of determination and resilience that would define his character in later years. His parents, particularly his father, were deeply concerned about his health and sought various treatments to alleviate his suffering. It was this quest for a cure that would eventually lead the Miscavige family to Scientology. David attended Marple Newton High School in Pennsylvania, where he was known as a bright but rebellious student. His academic performance was inconsistent, partly due to his health issues and partly because he found the traditional education system stifling. In the late 1960s, Ron Miscavige came across Scientology when he was introduced to the church by a colleague. Intrigued by the promise of Dianetics to cure ailments and improve mental health, Ron decided to explore the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard. Convinced of its benefits, he introduced his family to Scientology. David, at the tender age of 12, underwent his first Dianetics session. Remarkably, after this initial session, David reportedly experienced a dramatic improvement in his asthma, which his family attributed to the efficacy of Scientology. This apparent miracle solidified the Miscavige family's commitment to the church. In 1971, seeking to be closer to the heart of Scientology, the family moved to St. Hill Manor in East Grinstead, England, which was Scientology's headquarters at the time. It was here that David's involvement with the church deepened. He quickly became known as a prodigious auditor, gaining the attention of high-ranking members within the organization. By age 16, David decided to drop out of high school and dedicate himself fully to Scientology. He joined the Sea Organization, the elite, highly disciplined core of the church, and signed the infamous billion-year contract. David's entry into the Sea Org began his rapid ascent within Scientology's hierarchy. His early years in the Sea Organization were marked by hard work, dedication, and an unyielding drive to succeed. David's assertive and keen understanding of Scientology's doctrines allowed him to quickly rise through the ranks. David's early years were characterized by his transformation from a sickly child to a formidable leader. His introduction to Scientology, driven by a quest for health and healing, set him on a path of unwavering dedication to the church. The traits he developed during his formative years laid the groundwork for his later role as the controversial and powerful leader of the Church of Scientology.
David Miscavige joined the Sea Organization in 1976 at the age of 16. It was a formative period that set the stage for his future leadership within the Church of Scientology. As a member of the Commodore's Messenger Organization, or CMO, Miscavige worked directly under the supervision of L. Ron Hubbard. The CMO was a group of young, hand-picked Sea Org members who served as Hubbard's personal aides. Their duties included relaying messages, carrying out orders, and ensuring that Hubbard's directives were executed with precision. The CMO members were typically very young, often between the ages of 12 and 18. Hubbard believed that younger members were more energetic, dedicated, and easier to mold to his strict standards. These teenagers were usually second-generation Scientologists whose parents were already deeply involved in the church. Potential members were carefully selected based on their loyalty, dedication, and perceived ability to prepare for the demands of being a CMO member. They underwent rigorous training, including extensive study of Hubbard's policies. One of the primary duties of the CMO members was to relay Hubbard's messages and orders to other Sea Org members and ensuring that Hubbard's high standards were met. This required a deep understanding of Hubbard's directives and the ability to communicate them accurately and authoritatively. They handled various administrative tasks, including organizing schedules, managing communications, and overseeing project implementation. CMO members played a key role in enforcing discipline aboard the Apollo and later at other Scientology bases. They monitored the other behavior of other Sea Org members, reporting any infractions, and carried out disciplinary measures as directed by Hubbard. Mistakes were not tolerated, and the pressure to succeed was immense. CMO members were expected to uphold and enforce these standards, sometimes through harsh disciplinary measures. Failure to meet expectations could result in demotion, additional work assignments, or even confinement to the Rehabilitation Project Force, or the RPF. The culture of secrecy reinforced their insular existence and deepened their commitment to Scientology's goals. The CMO was established in the early 1970s and continued to play a vital role within the Sea Org and the broader Church of Scientology. While the Apollo ceased its operations as the flagship, the CMO continued to exist and operate from various land-based Scientology centers. The organization evolved and expanded its influence within the Church's administrative hierarchy.
David's early years in the Sea Org were marked by unwavering dedication and tireless work ethics. He swiftly built a reputation for efficiency and commitment. His assertive nature and deep comprehension of Scientology's principles, along with his close proximity to Hubbard, provided him with unparalleled opportunities. His responsibilities grew, and he was crucial in managing Hubbard's communication and overseeing critical projects. One of the defining moments in David Miscavige's journey was his pivotal role in the mission corporate category sort-out in the early 1980s. The MCCS was a complex reorganization endeavor aimed at restructuring the church's corporate and financial affairs. This initiative was of paramount importance in consolidating control over the various entities of Scientology and safeguarding its organization from legal challenges. David's role in the MCCS demonstrated his strategic acumen and willingness to make tough decisions. He successfully navigated the intricate legal and reorganizational challenges, earning him significant influence and control within the church. This period also marked the beginning of the more assertive and at times a ruthless leadership style. David Miscavige's rise within Scientology was not without its share of controversy. Even in his early years, there was an indication of the aggression and confrontational leadership style that would later define him. He was notorious for his authoritarian approach, demanding unwavering loyalty and obedience from those under him. His management style often involved intense scrutiny and pressure, creating a high-stress environment for his subordinates. One notable incident highlighting his controversial behavior was his handling of the RPF, the Rehabilitation Project Force, a program within the Sea organization designed as a form of rehabilitation and punishment for the members deemed to have failed in their duties. Under David's oversight, the RPF became notorious for its harsh conditions and rigorous demands. Critics argued that the program's methods were extreme and punitive, raising ethical concerns about its impact on its members.
The transition of power in the Church of Scientology following the death of its founder, L. Ron Hubbard, is a story of intrigue, strategic maneuvering, and ruthless consolidation. At the center of this dramatic shift was David Miscavige, a young and ambitious church member whose rise to power marked the beginning of a new and controversial era. By the 1980s, David Miscavige had already established himself as a formidable figure within Scientology. His involvement in the Mission Corporate Category Sort-Out, or the MCCS project, a critical restructuring of the church's corporate and financial affairs, was a pivotal moment. This project not only demonstrated his strategic acumen, but also positioned him as a key player within the organization, setting the stage for his future rise to power. In 1980, L. Ron Hubbard withdrew from public life and went into seclusion primarily due to increasing legal pressures and health concerns. Hubbard communicated with the church leadership through a trusted inner circle during this period. Hubbard's seclusion created a power vacuum within Scientology. Although Hubbard continued to issue orders from behind the scenes, the day-to-day operations and decision-making responsibilities increasingly fell to his trusted aides. By leveraging his proximity to Hubbard and growing influence within the church, David Miscavige began to position himself as a central figure in the emerging power structure. One of the most significant and controversial moves by Miscavige during the transitional period was the purge of Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's wife and influential figure within Scientology. Mary Sue had been deeply involved in the church operations and was a key leader of the Guardian's Office, the church's intelligence and legal arm. However, following Operation Snow White scandal involving illegal activities conducted by the Guardian's Office, she became a liability. In 1981, Miscavige orchestrated the removal of Mary Sue from power, a move that was met with controversy and resistance. His argument that her continued involvement threatened the church's stability and future was a bold assertion. This controversial action was a clear demonstration of his willingness to take decisive and controversial actions to secure his position and protect the organization. In 1982, David Miscavige played a pivotal role in creating the Religious Technology Center, or RTC, a new entity designed to oversee the application of Scientology's teaching and protect its trademarks. As chairman of the RTC's board, Miscavige gained significant control over the church's doctrines and practices. This position allowed him to monitor and enforce the adherence of Hubbard's teachings, further consolidating his influence. When L. Ron Hubbard died on January 24, 1986, his death marked a critical turning point. The church faced an existential crisis. How to continue without the charismatic founder? Miscavige, already positioned as a leader, moved swiftly to manage the transition. In a carefully orchestrated event on January 27, 1986, at the Hollywood Palladium, David Miscavige publicly announced Hubbard's death to the Scientology community. Speaking before thousands of Scientologists, Miscavige delivered a eulogy that emphasized Hubbard's continued spiritual presence and framed his departure as a natural progression in his research into the spiritual realm. This speech was crucial in reassuring the church's members and maintaining their faith in Scientology's future. The transition period was not without its challenges. Miscavige faced a barrage of legal battles and internal power struggles, all of which he met with characteristic assertiveness. His systematic removal of potential rivals and reinforcement of his control over the church's various entities was a testament to his determination and strategic prowess. One notable example was the handling of Pat and Annie Broker, two high-ranking members who had been close to Hubbard during his final years. Miscavige maneuvered to marginalize them, asserting that they had no legitimate claim to leadership. This move was part of a broader effort to eliminate threats to his authority. Under Miscavige's leadership, Scientology underwent significant organizational changes. He implemented strict controls and centralized authority within the RTC. This period saw an increase in the church's legal and public relations efforts to counter criticism and protect its interests. Miscavige's leadership became more pronounced, marked by a focus on discipline and loyalty. David Miscavige's ascent was not without controversy. Reports of aggressive tactics, including intimidation and coercion, began to surface. Former members described a culture of fear and control within the church, with Miscavige at the helm. These allegations would later become a significant aspect of criticisms against his leadership, underlying the gravity of his actions. These allegations, which would later become a significant aspect of the criticisms against his leadership, underline the gravity of his actions. David Miscavige's takeover of Scientology following Hubbard's death marked the beginning of a new era for the church. His strategic maneuvers, decisive actions, and controversial methods not only secured his position as its leader, but also significantly shaped the church's trajectory. Under his leadership, the church expanded its influence globally, but faced increased scrutiny and criticisms.
There are numerous accounts on how David Miscavige rose to power within the Church of Scientology, particularly from claims made by several high-ranking ex-Scientology members. These members describe Miscavige's takeover as more of a coup, positioning himself as the leader after the founder L. Ron Hubbard passed away without a clear succession plan. Shortly before his death, Hubbard issued a directive promoting himself to the rank of admiral and named Pat and Annie Broker as loyal officers. This move was interpreted by some insiders as an attempt to ensure that Pat and Annie would assume greater control over the church. However, the directive was vague and lacked the formality of an official appointment, which led to significant ambiguity regarding its legitimacy. David Miscavige, upon becoming aware of this development, allegedly ordered his subordinates to collect and destroy all copies of this directive, claiming they were unauthorized. This action was part of his strategy to consolidate power. During Hubbard's final years, he lived in seclusion, reportedly working on the upper OT level courses. Pat and Annie, who were with Hubbard during this period, claimed to possess his last writings. Pat leveraged these supposed documents to maintain his position at the helm of Scientology Inc., threatening to withhold them unless he remained in control. Miscavige responded by conducting several aggressive searches of Pat's storage facilities in an attempt to recover these documents, but these efforts yielded no results. Ultimately, when it became apparent that the documents may not exist, Miscavige allegedly negotiated a financial settlement with Pat to facilitate his quiet exit from the organization. David Miscavige's reign has been marked by a series of strict and controversial measures to ensure absolute dedication and loyalty from its followers. The Sea Organization has implemented several controversial policies, one of the most contentious being the prohibition of Sea Org members having children, a policy that has had profound and often heartbreaking consequences for its members. The decision to prohibit Sea Org members from having children is rooted in Miscavige's vision for the organization. He believes that the presence of children would be a distraction and a hindrance to the organization's primary mission, the expansion and preservation of Scientology. Sea Org members are required to sign a billion-year contract symbolizing their eternal commitment to the church. This level of commitment, according to Miscavige, is incompatible with the responsibilities and distractions of parenthood. The policy was enforced with an iron fist. Sea Org members who became pregnant were given a stark choice: terminate the pregnancy or leave the Sea Org. This ultimatum has led to numerous forced abortions, a practice that has been condemned by former members and human rights organizations alike. There are countless stories of members' lives forever altered by this policy. One former member recounts her harrowing experience with the Sea Org. She joined the Sea Org at the age of 16 and was dedicated to the cause. However, when she became pregnant, she faced an unimaginable dilemma. She was told in no uncertain terms that her pregnancy was a violation of Sea Org policy and that she had to terminate it if she wanted to remain in the organization. She ultimately chose to leave the Sea Org, but the experience left her scarred and disillusioned with the church to which she had once devoted her life to. The enforcement of this policy has led to a culture of fear and secrecy within the Sea Org. Members who do become pregnant often try to hide the conditions as long as possible, fearing the inevitable ultimatum. This environment has led to a significant number of members leaving the Sea Org unable to reconcile their desire for a family with the rigid demands of the organization. David Miscavige has defended this policy by framing it as a necessary measure to ensure the effectiveness and dedication of the Sea Organization. He argues that the intense demand of Sea Org life, which often includes long hours and minimal contact with the outside world, are not conducive to raising children. David maintains that the sacrifices made by the Sea Org members are for the greater good of Scientology and that their unwavering commitment to it is what has allowed the church to grow and thrive. Critics, however, argue that the policy violates basic human rights and is an example of Miscavige's extreme control over his followers. They point to the numerous stories of women who have been coerced into abortions and families that have been torn apart by the church's policies. These critics see Miscavige's stance as emblematic of the broader issue within Scientology, where individuals' well-being is often sacrificed for the perceived greater good of the organization. The policy on children within the Sea Org remained one of the most controversial aspects of David Miscavige's leadership. It's a stark reminder of the length to which the church will go to maintain control and ensure absolute dedication of its members. As more former members come forward with their stories, the true human cost of this policy continues to be revealed, painting a troubling picture of life within Scientology's most elite and secretive order.
High-profile defections tied to David Miscavige's leadership are just the tip of this colossal iceberg of those who chose to leave Scientology and expose its alleged abuses. Each narrative underscores the complex dynamics within the church and the lengths to which it will go to maintain control. As we continue to explore these stories, we honor the bravery of those who have spoken out and those who continue to speak out, shining a light on Scientology's dark secrets. Leah Remini, a name synonymous with bold defiance against Scientology, was a dedicated member for over 3 decades. Her departure in 2013 sent shockwaves through the church and the media. Remini's journey began at the age of 9, and she quickly rose through the ranks, becoming one of the church's most prominent celebrity members. Her faith began to waver when she started questioning the church's leadership, particularly the whereabouts of Shelly Miscavige, David Miscavige's wife, who had not been seen in public for years. Remini's persistence in seeking answers led to her being labeled as a suppressive person, a term used to describe those deemed enemies of the church. Her subsequent departures and release of her memoir, Troublemaker: Surviving Hollywood and Scientology, exposed the church's alleged abuses, including forced labor, intimidation, and financial exploitation. Leah's story directly implicates David Miscavige, revealing his role in maintaining the church's oppressive control over its members. Mike Rinder, once the head of the church's Office of Special Affairs, or OSA, was a high-ranking official who managed the church's public relations and legal affairs. Given his extensive knowledge of the church's inner workings, Rinder's defection in 2007 was a significant blow to Scientology. His departure was not just a quiet exit, but a loud denunciation. He revealed how the church systematically silenced dissent, monitored members, and orchestrated smear campaigns against critics. His first-hand accounts of Miscavige's alleged physical abuse and authoritarian rule painted a grim picture of life inside the church's upper echelons. Rinder's revelations about Miscavige's personal involvement in abusive practices added weight to the growing allegations against the church's leadership. Lisa McPherson's tragic story is perhaps one of the most heart-wrenching accounts associated with Scientology. A dedicated member, McPherson sought spiritual solace through the church's practices. However, her death in 1995 under suspicious circumstances at the church's Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater, Florida, became a focal point for critics. McPherson had been involved in a minor car accident and exhibited signs of mental breakdown shortly thereafter. Instead of receiving medical care, she was taken to the church's facility where she was placed in isolation for 17 days. Her death, officially attributed to a pulmonary embolism, sparked a lengthy legal battle and brought an intense scrutiny to the church's practices. The handling of McPherson's case underscores the church's prioritization of its image over the well-being of its members, a policy reportedly enforced under Miscavige's leadership. Her death and the subsequent cover-up efforts highlight the dangerous consequences of the church's insular and authoritarian practices. Academy Award-winning director Paul Haggis left Scientology in 2009 after 35 years of membership. His public resignation letter, addressed to the then outspoken Tommy Davis, criticized the church's stance on same-sex marriage and its treatment of former members who have spoken out. Haggis's departure was notable not just for his celebrity status, but for the eloquence and clarity of his objections. He accused the church of human rights violations and condemned its policies for disconnection, which forced members to sever ties with family and friends deemed antagonistic to Scientology. Haggis's pointed criticisms were a direct challenge to Miscavige's leadership, questioning the moral and ethical direction in which he was steering the church. David Miscavige's father, Ron Miscavige, left the church in 2012 and authored the revealing book, Ruthless: Scientology, My Son David Miscavige, and Me. His insider perspective provided a unique view into the church's operation and his son's rise to power. Ron's account detailed how David Miscavige's leadership transformed the church into a more secretive and controlling entity. He described the oppressive atmosphere at the church's international base in California, where staff endured harsh conditions and relentless scrutiny. Ron's departure underscored the personal cost of allegiance to Scientology, even for the family of its leader. His testimony sheds light on the internal dynamics of Scientology under David Miscavige, illustrating the pervasive control and fear that define his leadership style. These stories collectively paint a picture of the church under David Miscavige's authoritarian rule, where dissent is crushed and loyalty enforced through fear and intimidation.
David Miscavige is a man surrounded by power, controversy, and mystery. At his side for many years was his wife Shelly Miscavige, a figure whose sudden disappearance has sparked widespread intrigue and concern. This is their story. Shelly Miscavige, born Michelle Diane Barnett, was raised in a Scientology family. Her parents were dedicated members and she was deeply entrenched in the church's activities from a young age. David and Shelly's courtship was unique, shaped by the demanding environment of the Sea Org. Dating within the Sea organization was often monitored and relationships had to align with the church's strict rule. Despite these constraints, David and Shelly managed to build a strong connection. They spent time together during their limited off-duty hours, sharing their passion for Scientology and the dreams for its future. Miscavige asked Shelly to marry him, promising to build a life together dedicated to the church's mission. Shelly accepted, and in 1982, they married in a Scientology ceremony. Their union was a symbol of their unwavering commitment to the church and each other. Together they navigated the complex and often tumultuous waters of Scientology's upper echelons. As David's influence within the church grew, so did Shelly's responsibilities. She was known for her meticulous attention to detail and ability to manage the church's daily operations. Those who knew her described her as quiet, dedicated, and immensely loyal to her husband and Scientology. She was often seen by David's side, playing a crucial role behind the scenes. The couple lived a life of privilege within the insular world of Scientology. They resided in luxurious accommodations at the church's various international bases, including the Gold Base in Riverside County, California. Gold Base, also known as Int Base, was a sprawling property that served as the church's international headquarters. Here, they lived in a well-appointed home, surrounded by high security measures and an air of exclusivity. Their lives were intensely intertwined with Scientology's workings. The couple was rarely seen apart, and Shelly was often involved in high-level decisions and operations. Despite their seemingly glamorous life, the pressures and demands of their roles were immense. In the early 2000s, Shelly's presence began to diminish. She was last seen in public in 2007 at her father's funeral and then seemingly vanished. Speculations about her whereabouts grew as former Scientologists and critics raised concern about her safety and well-being. Actress Leah Remini filed a missing persons report with the Los Angeles Police Department in 2013. The LAPD reportedly conducted a welfare check and stated that Shelly was fine. No further detail was provided. This brief and opaque response did little to quell the rumors and concerns. Former high-ranking Scientologists have suggested various theories about Shelly's disappearance. Some believe that she was sent to a secretive church facility, possibly the Church of Spiritual Technology's remote base in California's San Bernardino Mountains. Others speculate that she may be under some form of house arrest or intensive supervision due to internal disputes or power struggles within the church. Despite the church's claim that Shelly is living a private life devoted to her religious work, lack of public appearance and credible information has fueled ongoing suspicions and concern. The story of David and Shelly Miscavige is one of power, devotion, and mystery. While David continues to lead Scientology with an iron fist, Shelly's fate remained one of the church's most closely guarded secrets. Her disappearance from the public eye has cast a long shadow over Scientology, raising questions about the treatment of its members and the lengths to which the leadership will go to maintain control. As the years pass, the demand for answers grow louder. Shelly Miscavige's story is a poignant reminder of the hidden lives and untold stories within the enigmatic world of Scientology. In this world, loyalty and secrecy intersect in unsettling ways.
As the ecclesiastical leader of the Church of Scientology, Miscavige has been a controversial figure since assuming his role following the death of L. Ron Hubbard. While he is credited with expanding the church and establishing its global presence, his tenure has been marred by numerous legal battles and allegations of abuse. Let's take a look at some of Miscavige's most significant legal challenges and how he and the Church of Scientology have responded to these allegations. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the church faced a series of lawsuits from former members who alleged abuse, harassment, and fraudulent practices. One of the most notable cases was that of Lawrence Wollersheim, a former Scientologist who sued the church for mental distress and financial ruin. In 1986, a jury awarded Wollersheim $30 million, later reduced to $2.5 million, after finding that the church's practices had indeed caused him severe emotional distress. During this period, Miscavige implemented aggressive legal strategies to defend the church. These included hiring private investigators to scrutinize plaintiffs and their attorneys and filing countersuits. The church's legal tactics often aimed to overwhelm opponents with paperwork and legal fees, a practice critics dubbed the dead agent tactic, intended to discredit and intimidate. One of the most infamous cases involving David Miscavige was the death of Lisa McPherson in 1995. Her death led to a wrongful death lawsuit filed by her family and criminal charges against the church for abuse and neglect. The McPherson case drew widespread media attention and highlighted the church's secretive practices. Miscavige was implicated in overseeing the handling of McPherson's treatment and the subsequent cover-up. The church ultimately settled the wrongful death lawsuit in 2004 for an undisclosed amount, and the criminal charges were dropped in 2000 after the state concluded they could not prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Over the years, numerous former Scientologists have accused Miscavige of leading a campaign of harassment and intimidation against defectors and critics. These allegations include surveillance, defamation, and orchestrating smear campaigns. One prominent example is the case of Marty Rathbun, a former high-ranking official who left the church in 2004. Rathbun publicly detailed how he was subjected to harassment, including being followed, having his property damaged, and enduring online defamation. Miscavige and the church have consistently denied these allegations, portraying defectors as disgruntled former members with ulterior motives. The church's official stance is that it does not engage in illegal activities and that any actions taken against critics are lawful responses to false allegations and attacks against the church. In recent years, Miscavige has continued to face legal challenges. One significant ongoing case involves former Scientologist Valerie Haney, who filed a lawsuit in 2019 alleging kidnapping, stalking, and human trafficking. Haney claims she was held against her will at the church's Gold Base in California and subjected to intense surveillance after her escape. The church has denied all allegations, asserting that Haney is attempting to exploit her former affiliation with the Church of Scientology for financial gain. Additionally, the church has been scrutinized for its tax-exempt status granted by the IRS in 1993 after a prolonged battle. Critics argue that the church operates more like a for-profit business than a religious organization and should not qualify for tax exemption. David Miscavige's tenure as the leader of the Church of Scientology has been fraught with legal battles and allegations of abuse, harassment, and fraudulent practices. Despite these challenges, Miscavige and the church have employed aggressive legal strategies to defend their actions and maintain their influence. While some cases have resulted in settlements or dropped charges, the controversy surrounding Miscavige and the church persists, continuing to fuel public debate and legal scrutiny. As new allegations emerge, the complex and contentious history of Miscavige's leadership remains a focal point of critics and former members seeking accountability.
As the church's leader, Miscavige has long been a figure of intrigue and controversy, and his public perception has shifted drastically over the years. The portrayal of David Miscavige in documentaries, exposés, and media coverages have evolved, particularly in recent years. In the early years of his leadership, Miscavige was primarily viewed within the context of his role within the Church of Scientology. He was a relatively obscure figure in the public, known mainly to those within the church and the critics of Scientology. During this period, Miscavige worked diligently to establish his authority and expand the church's influence. His efforts included high-profile legal battles, acquiring new properties, and promoting Scientology through celebrity endorsements. During the 1980s and 90s, Miscavige's public image was largely shaped by the church's public relation efforts. He was often portrayed as a dynamic and visionary leader dedicated to continuing L. Ron Hubbard's legacy. However, as former members and critics began to speak out about their experiences, cracks in the carefully crafted image began to appear. The early 2000s marked a significant shift in the public perception of David Miscavige. Former high-ranking members such as Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder left the church and began to expose Scientology's inner workings. They described a culture of fear, abuse, and manipulation directly implicating Miscavige in these practices. These revelations, coupled with investigative journalism, began to paint a starkly different picture of Miscavige's leadership. One pivotal moment was the 2008 leaked Tom Cruise Scientology video by the group Anonymous. The video, intended for internal use, featured Tom Cruise speaking passionately about Scientology with David Miscavige visibly supporting him. The leak of the video drew widespread attention and ridicule, casting its shadow over Miscavige and the church. Anonymous' subsequent protest and online campaign further damaged the church's public image, highlighting allegations of abuse and corruption. Two of the most influential works in this regard are the 2015 documentary Going Clear, Scientology in the Prison of Belief, and A&E's series Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath, which aired from 2016 to 2019. Going Clear, directed by Alex Gibney and based on the Lawrence Wright book, offered a comprehensive look at the history of Scientology, its practices, and the allegations against Miscavige. The documentary featured interviews with former high-ranking members who detailed their experiences of abuse and intimidation. This film was critically acclaimed and reached a broad audience, significantly impacting public perception of Miscavige in the church. Actress Leah Remini further brought these issues to highlight with her series Scientology in the Aftermath. The series provided a platform for former members to share their stories of abuse, harassment, and disconnection from family members. Remini's high profile and the series' emotional narratives resonated with viewers, amplifying the negative portrayal of Miscavige and the church. Today, David Miscavige is widespread viewed as a controversial and polarizing figure. The numerous allegations of abuse, harassment, and unethical practices have overshadowed his accomplishments within the church. Public perception of Miscavige is largely negative, influenced by the testimonies of former members and the persistent media coverage of the church's legal battles and internal practices. The impact of these documentaries on Miscavige's image cannot be overstated. They have brought a level of scrutiny and accountability that was previously lacking. The narratives presented in these works have humanized the experiences of former members, making the allegations against Miscavige reliable and credible to the general public. Despite the church's efforts to counteract these portrayals through lawsuits, public statements, and promotional campaigns, the damage to Miscavige's reputation has been significant and perhaps unrepairable. The church's aggressive responses to critics and defectors have often backfired, reinforcing the negative image portrayed in the media. Perhaps these successful tactics of yesteryears no longer work. The evolution of public perception of David Miscavige from a relatively obscure religious leader to a highly controversial figure has been significantly influenced by the documentaries and media coverage. While earlier portrayals focused on his role in expanding the Church of Scientology, recent years have seen a drastic shift towards highlighting allegations of abuse, harassment, and manipulation. As more members come forward and more investigative works are produced, Miscavige's image continues to be scrutinized, impacting both his personal reputation and the public perception of Scientology.
Making headlines in recent years, Danny Masterson, best known for his role on the TV show That 70s Show, faced criminal charges for raping 3 women in the early 2000s. Masterson, a Scientologist, denied all charges, pleading not guilty. His trial drew significant attention not only due to his celebrity status, but also because of the Church of Scientology's alleged involvement in covering up the incidents and intimidating the victims. During the trial, the victims, who were also members of the Church of Scientology at the time of the alleged assaults, testified that they were discouraged from reporting Masterson to the police. They claimed that church officials warned them that they would be labeled suppressive persons and be excommunicated if they went public with their allegations. The plaintiffs also alleged that they faced harassment and intimidation from the church after leaving Scientology and cooperating with law enforcement. David Miscavige, as the leader of Scientology, was indirectly implicated through these allegations. The plaintiffs and critics have suggested that the culture of secrecy and retaliation within Scientology, as described in the trial, is a direct result of Miscavige's leadership. Although Miscavige was not charged or directly involved in the legal proceedings, his management of the church and its policies were scrutinized throughout the trial. The Church of Scientology has consistently denied any wrongdoing in connection with the Masterson case. In official statements, the church has claimed that the allegations are false and that they do not discourage members from reporting crimes to authorities. They have framed the testimonies against them as attempts to exploit the church's high profile and financial resources. The trial has further damaged the public image of both Danny Masterson and the Church of Scientology. The graphic testimonies of allegations and systematic harassment and intimidation have painted a grim picture of the church's internal practices. This case added to the growing body of evidence and allegations from former members, contributing to a broader critical narrative about the church under Miscavige's leadership. Danny Masterson was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison in September 2023 after a jury found him guilty of 2 counts of forcible rape.
In the next episode of Sins of Scientology, we delve deep into the shadowy operations that turned Clearwater, Florida into the enigmatic stronghold of Scientology. Uncover how this elusive organization stealthily acquired properties under a web of front names, gradually turning the city into their secret global headquarters known as the Flag Land Base. We'll expose the strategic maneuvers, the hidden agendas, and the profound impact on the community. Join us as we peel back the layers of deception and reveal the chilling truth behind Clearwater's transformation. Stay with us as we continue to expose these stories and more, offering a critical look at one of the most controversial organizations of our time. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and join us on the next episode as we continue to expose the sins of Scientology. Until then, keep questioning, keep seeking, and may your journey be as rich and enlightening as the stories you encounter.